The recreation deck of the GCS Valiant smelled like burnt synth protein and regret, which honestly was pretty much standard for any military vessel 3 months into a tour. Vrask sat in the corner booth, his 4 eyes tracking the younger recruits as they shuffled their way through the food line. All shiny armor and untested confidence. He hated them already. Not really, but kind of. "Commander Vrask." The voice cut through the ambient noise like a plasma cutter through hull plating. Patsek, a fresh-faced Quellan, with scales that still gleamed copper instead of the dulled bronze that came with actual combat experience, bounded over with the kind of enthusiasm that made Vrask's secondary stomach churn. "Is it true? The stories about Earth?" Vrask's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or indigestion or both. He set down his beverage, a thick purple liquid that tasted like disappointment and allegedly contained nutrients. "Sit down, recruit, before your eagerness causes a hull breach." It dropped into the seat across from him, followed quickly by 3 others. Mora, a 6-limbed Hexian, who moved with the nervous energy of someone who had never been shot at. Lorne, built like a cargo loader, all thick carapace and slow thought. And Jex, whose species Vrask could never quite remember, but who had the good sense to look skeptical about everything. "You fought with them, right?" Pip pressed, leaning forward. "The humans? During the Krath incursion?" "Alongside them," Vrask corrected, taking another sip of his terrible drink. "There is a difference, and you would be wise to remember it." "What does that mean?" Mora asked, her translator chip rendering her chittering into standard Galactic common with a slight delay. Vrask settled back, his exoskeleton creaking against the booth's padding. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past in faster-than-light transit, turning the universe into beautiful, meaningless lines. He had about 6 hours before his next shift, and these recruits looked like they needed something. Education, maybe. Or trauma. With humans, the two often overlap. "It means," Vrask began, his voice dropping into the register he used for tactical briefings, "that you fight with allies. You fight alongside humans. The preposition matters because one suggests cooperation and the other suggests survival." Jex snorted, a sound like hydraulics failing. "Come on, Commander. They cannot be that different. They are mammals, right? Soft, squishy, slow to heal. What makes them so special?" Oh, this was going to be fun. Vrask's mandibles spread in something that was definitely not a smile, because his species did not smile, but conveyed roughly the same predatory satisfaction. "Let me tell you about Jake Hendricks." The recruits leaned in. Of course they did. This was 7 cycles ago, when the Kreth were pushing hard into the Outer Veil. My battalion got assigned to Joint Task Force 17, which was a fancy way of saying they threw everyone together and hoped we did not shoot each other before the enemy did. Vrask paused for effect, watching their faces. The humans sent a company. About 140 of them. We thought it was an insult. We had 3,000 troops. What were 140 mammals going to do? "And," Pip could not help himself. "And on the first day we lost 47 soldiers in an ambush. Krath plasma mortars, dug into a canyon system we had failed to scout properly. They had overlapping fields of fire, prepared fallback positions. The whole tactical disaster. Our advance stopped completely. We were pinned down, taking casualties every time someone moved, and our commander was screaming into the comm for air support that was not coming." Vrask took another drink, letting the silence build. Jake Hendricks was a corporal. Not even an officer. Just some human from a place called Texas, which I later learned was a geographic location known for producing humans who were, and I quote, "built different." His translator struggled with the slang, rendering it with a confused warble. He walked up to our commander, who was Kellex, the old 4 horns from Brekka, and he said, "I am going to fix this." Lorne shifted his bulk. "How? What did he do? Call in his own air support?" "No," Vrask said quietly. He put on his armor, grabbed his rifle and started walking toward the canyon. The recruits exchanged glances. "By himself?" Mora's voice pitched up in disbelief. "By himself," Vrask confirmed. At first, then 2 other humans jogged after him. Amy Cho and Vic Torres. I remember their names because I had to write the after-action report, and I stared at those names for about 3 hours trying to figure out how to explain what happened next without sounding insane. He had their complete attention now. Even the ambient noise of the recreation deck seemed to fade. McCrae had 16 fortified positions, interlocking fire zones, kill boxes covering every approach. Our tactical analysis said we would need orbital bombardment or a full battalion assault with acceptable losses projected at 30%. Vrask's claws tapped against the table. 3 humans walked into that canyon at 1400 hours. And? Jex was leaning forward now too. Skepticism abandoned. At 1420 the first explosion went off. At 1422 the second. By 1430 we could hear small arms fire echoing through the canyon. But it was not the sound of a firefight. It was deliberate. Methodical. Pop, pop, pop. Like someone was conducting an experiment. Vrask's voice dropped even lower. At 1500 hours Jake Hendricks' voice came over the comm. He said, "Canyon is clear, you can advance now. Also, we need a medic." Vic got shot. The silence stretched. "That is impossible," Jex finally said. "I thought so too," Vrask agreed. "I flew down there myself." "You know what I found?" He waited, watching them squirm. 16 craft positions. All destroyed. Some blown up, some burned. Some just empty. Bodies everywhere but our casualties. 0. Except Vic, who got shot in the leg and was complaining loudly about how Amy would not let him walk it off. Vrask's mandibles clicked rapidly. And Jake Hendricks, sitting on a rock, eating something from a foil package. He offered me one, called it a protein bar. It tasted like cardboard and chemicals, and he said that was normal. Pipe's scales had shifted to a paler copper. "How did they do it?" "That," Vrask said, "is the question I asked." So Jake explained. Very patiently, like I was a hatchling learning basic math. He leaned forward, and the recruits mirrored him unconsciously. Humans have this concept called acceptable risk. But their definition of acceptable is... Vrask searched for words. Flexible. Jake told me they split up. Amy went left. Vic went right. Jake went center. No communication. No real plan, just mutual understanding that they were going to ruin the craft's day and figure out the details as they went. "That is not tactics." Lorne rumbled. "That is suicide." "That is what I said." Rizak's voice rose with remembered frustration. And Jake laughed. He actually laughed and said, "Nah. Suicide would be walking straight at them. We did something called aggressive improvisation." Then he described in detail how he climbed a cliff face under fire, crawled through a ventilation shaft that was not on any of our maps, dropped into a craft command bunker, and shot 7 enemy combatants before they could react. He used a knife for the last 3 because, and these were his exact words, "I did not want to waste ammunition." Mora's limbs had curled in protectively. "What about the other 2 humans?" Amy Cho apparently found a vehicle depot, hot-wired a craft transport, drove it through 2 positions while shooting out the window, then crashed it into a 3rd position and detonated the fuel cells. Vrask paused. On purpose, she set the crash up so she could dive clear at the last second, but close enough that the blast caught her too, broke 4 ribs. She said it was worth it. "And Vic?" Pip whispered. "Vic Torres decided the best way to deal with a fortified position was to throw rocks at it, until they came out to investigate, then shoot them." Vrask's voice held a note of awe. "It worked. 3 times. The 4th time, they shot him, hence the leg wound." But his exact words were, 3 out of 4 is not bad for the rock strategy." The recruits sat in stunned silence. "There is more," Vrask continued, because he was warming to his subject now, and these younglings needed to understand what they were dealing with. "After the canyon, we pushed forward. Joint operations, humans and galactic forces working together, and I started paying attention, really paying attention, to how they operated." He gestured toward the viewport, toward the endless stars. "We have rules, doctrine, established protocols for every situation. The Galactic Military Code is 4,000 pages long, covering everything from proper formation spacing to authorized retreat procedures. Humans have rules too. They just treat them as suggestions." Jex made a noise of disbelief. "I am serious," Vrask insisted. "I watched a human lieutenant named Rita Vasquez receive a direct order to hold her position. The enemy was flanking us, Command wanted her squad to anchor our right side. She acknowledged the order, then immediately led her entire squad on an assault into the enemy's rear positions. That is insubordination, Mora said. That is initiative, Vrask corrected. She collapsed the entire enemy flank, turned what should have been our retreat into a rout. When her captain asked why she disobeyed orders, she said, "I held the position. Just not the one you told me to. The position I chose was better." He paused. "She got a medal." Lorne's massive head shook slowly. "This cannot be standard for all humans." "No," Galactic admitted. "No, it is not. I have met human accountants, human engineers, human civilians who are perfectly reasonable, rule-following beings. But the ones they send to war," he clicked his mandibles thoughtfully, "those are different. They volunteer for it. Did you know that? Most human militaries are not conscripted. They choose to be there." "That is insane," Pip breathed. "That is what I thought," Vrask agreed. "So I asked Jake about it one night. We were in a forward operating base, sharing watch duty. I said, 'Why would anyone volunteer for this?' And he looked at me with these strange little eyes they have. Just two of them, flat-faced and forward-focused like pursuit predators. And he said, 'Because someone has to. And I would rather it be me than someone who is not ready for it.'" Vrask's voice softened, just slightly. Then he told me about his home, about his family, about how war had never touched Earth. Not really, not for a long time. But when the Kraiths started their expansion, when the Galactic Council asked for help, humans looked at each other and said, "Well, we are good at this. We have practiced on each other for thousands of years. Maybe we should help." He tapped the table. "They are good at it. Terrifyingly good." "You make them sound like monsters," Jek said quietly. "No." Vrask shook his head. "Monsters would be easier to understand. Humans are complicated. Let me tell you about the same night. After Jake explained why he was there, we heard something. Movement in the dark, beyond the perimeter. Could have been animals. Could have been scouts. Probably was nothing." The recruits waited. Jake did not hesitate. He grabbed his rifle, vaulted over the barricade, and disappeared into the darkness. No backup, no permission. Just saw a potential threat and went to deal with it. Vrask's claws drummed a rhythm. I thought I would never see him again. I was already composing the notification to his command. Then, maybe 15 minutes later, he came back, carrying something. "What?" Pip asked, though he looked like he was not sure he wanted to know. "A Kraith scout. Alive, injured, but alive. Jake had shot him, non-lethally, then rendered first aid and dragged him back to base." Vrask's voice held wonder. He said, "Figured he might have intelligence value. Also, he was bleeding pretty bad, and I am not going to let someone die in the dirt if I can help it." Mora's translator Chip stuttered. "He saved an enemy combatant? After hunting him in the dark?" "Humans contain multitudes," Vrask said simply. "They will charge a fortified position alone, but they will also risk their lives to save an enemy. They will disobey direct orders if they think those orders are wrong, but they will follow a leader they trust into literal hell. They will laugh at injuries that would hospitalize most species, but they will grieve deeply for fallen comrades." He paused. "They are contradiction incarnate, and that makes them dangerous in ways our training never prepared us for." The recreation deck had grown quieter. Or maybe they were all just focused on Vrask's words. The stars continued their endless dance outside. "I want to tell you about one more thing," Vrask said, "before I lose you all to nightmares and doubt." This was toward the end of the campaign. We were assaulting a Kraith fortress world. Big operation, 12 galactic battalions, plus the human company. The plan was careful, methodical. We would bombard from orbit, land troops in phases, establish perimeters, advance slowly with proper support. He took another drink, grimacing at the taste. 2 days before the assault, Jake and 5 other humans came to a tactical briefing. They had spent their own time analyzing the fortress layout, and they had a different idea. Vrsk's eyes gleamed. They wanted to drop directly onto the fortress roof, breach through the upper levels, fight their way down to the command center and decapitate the entire Kraith leadership before the main assault even began. That is, Jek struggled for words. That is beyond reckless. That is brilliant, Vrask interrupted. Because that is what our commander called it, right before approving the plan. 6 humans, dropped from low orbit in armored pods, punching through the roof of an enemy fortress. The rest of us thought we were watching them die. We had monitoring equipment, tactical feeds, everything we could possibly use to track their progress. His mandibles spread wide. They cleared 40 levels in 3 hours. 3 hours. Fighting downward against an enemy with home advantage, superior numbers, prepared defenses. They used stairwells as choke points, turned the fortress's own layout against defenders, improvised explosives from materials they found. At one point, Amy Cho redirected a fuel line to flood an entire level with combustible gas, then shot it with a tracer round from 3 levels away. Vrask shook his head in remembered disbelief. The explosion was visible from orbit. Did they make it? Pip's voice was barely above a whisper. Did they make it? Vrask repeated. When our forces finally breached the fortress 6 hours later, we found the command center. Every craft officer, dead or captured. The fortress communications array destroyed. Their defense grid shut down, and in the middle of it all, 6 humans, 5 standing, 1 sitting because he had twisted his ankle. Lorne rumbled. Just a twisted ankle? From all that? Oh no. Vrask's laughter was sharp. They had injuries. Jake had a concussion. Amy had burns on her hands. Victoria's, because of course it was him again, had been shot twice. Another human, Tom Wu, had a broken collarbone. Rita Vasquez had a deep cut across her face that would definitely scar, and the one with the twisted ankle, Kai Ishida, also had 3 broken fingers. He let that sink in, and they were celebrating. They had found some kind of craft ceremonial beverage and were passing it around, laughing about the fight, comparing notes on the best kills. Rita was arguing that her grenade throw on level 28 deserved recognition. For's complaining that getting shot twice in one campaign was just bad luck. Palm was trying to set his own collarbone because, in his words, the medics are going to be busy with actual emergencies. The recruits looked physically ill. I asked Jake how he was feeling. He had just fallen 3 stories, gotten shot at approximately 4,000 times, blown up multiple structures, and personally killed more craft than my entire platoon combined.
You know what he said.
Vrask did not wait for an answer. He said, I am tired, hungry, and I really want a shower. But we won, so pretty good day overall. Then he offered me a drink of the craft beverage, which tasted like industrial solvent, and told me about this thing humans do called celebrating victories. He shuddered. We do not celebrate the same way. Clapp looked down at his own claws, still shiny and unmarked. Commander, are we supposed to fight like that? No. Vrask's answer was immediate and firm. You are Quallen, you fight like Quallen, you. He pointed at Mora, our Hexian. You fight like Hexian. Do not try to be human. You will fail, and you will die. Then why tell us these stories? Jax asked. Vrask stood, his exoskeleton creaking, his 4 eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. Because you need to understand what is out there. Not just the enemies we face, but the allies we stand beside. Humans are not better than us. They are not invincible. They die just like we do. His voice hardened. But they have spent their entire evolutionary history fighting. Fighting nature. Fighting each other. Fighting themselves. War is not something they learned. It is something they are. He looked at each recruit in turn. In 2 days we reached the Corvan system. Reports say there is heavy fighting. Odds are decent. You will see combat. Maybe you will fight alongside humans. Maybe not. But if you do, remember this. Vrask's mandibles clicked slowly, deliberately. Do not try to match their crazy, you cannot. Instead, use it. When a human says they have a plan, know that it will be 50% brilliant and 50% insane. When they charge forward, be ready to support them, because they will open holes in the enemy line that you can exploit. When they laugh in the face of danger, remember that it is not because they are fearless. It is because they have looked at fear and decided it is less important than the mission. He started to walk away, then paused. And if a human ever offers you food, say yes. Even if it tastes terrible, it is a bonding ritual for them. And trust me, you want humans to think of you as pack. Vrask's voice carried amusement. Jake sent me a care package last cycle. Included something called beef jerky and hot sauce. Tasted like spicy boot leather. I loved it. The recruits sat in silence as Vrask walked away, leaving them with their thoughts and their fears and their new understanding of what war truly meant when humans were involved. In the corner booth of the recreation deck, 4 young soldiers contemplated the uncomfortable truth that they had joined a galactic military that was currently allied with apex predators who had decided that fighting was their love language. It was, Pip thought while staring at his reflection in his untouched beverage, going to be a very interesting war. The Corvan system looked exactly like every other war zone Vrask had ever seen, which was to say it looked beautiful and terrible in equal measure. The planet below glowed with orbital fire, little pinpricks of light that marked ongoing battles, burning cities, or reactor failures. It was always hard to tell from space. Pip found Vrask in the armory, checking his equipment with the methodical patience of someone who had done this too many times. The young Quellen's scales had dulled slightly since their conversation 2 days ago, which meant he had been thinking, worrying, or both. "Commander," Pip said, his voice carefully steady, "we have been assigned to Ground Force Beta. Drop in 4 hours." Vrask grunted acknowledgement, running a claw along his rifle's power cell. "Good. Beta has competent leadership. You might survive. The briefing said we will be working with human units." Of course they would be. The universe had a sense of humor. "Which unit?" Vrask asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "Something called the 47th Expeditionary. They call themselves the Scorpions." Pip hesitated. "Is that significant?" Vrask's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter or a prayer for patience. "The Scorpions. Yes, that is significant. It means you are about to receive an education that no training simulation could ever provide. You know them?" "I know of them." Vrask set down his rifle, turning his full attention to the recruit. "The 47th is special even by human standards. They specialize in what humans call rapid assault operations, which is a polite way of saying they hit things very hard, very fast, and generally create situations where everyone else has to scramble to keep up." Pip's scales shifted to a worried bronze. "Is that good or bad?" "Yes," Vrask said simply. "Come. Walk with me. If you are going to drop with the Scorpions, you need to know what you are getting into." They walked through the corridors of the GCS Valiant, stepping aside for crew members rushing to battle stations, supply drones humming past with ammunition and medical supplies. War had a rhythm, a pulse that every military vessel learned to beat with. "The 47th, Vrask began, has a reputation. Their commander is a colonel named Diana Okafor. She is from a place on Earth called Nigeria, which apparently produces humans who combine tactical brilliance with complete unwillingness to accept defeat. I met her once during a joint planning session." "What was she like?" Vrask considered his words carefully. "Imagine if someone took pure determination, wrapped it in skin and bone, then gave it military training and a sense of humor." She walked into a room full of galactic commanders, most of whom had decades more experience, and proceeded to explain why our entire battle plan was inefficient. "That sounds disrespectful." "That is what we thought. Until she explained her alternative, which cut our projected casualties by 60% and shortened the operation timeline by half." Vrask's voice held grudging respect. "She was right. She is usually right. Humans hate that about her, which means she must be exceptional, because humans generally love confidence." They reached an observation deck, looking out at the organized chaos of a fleet preparing for assault. Dropships were being loaded, fighters were running final checks, and somewhere in that mechanical ballet, human forces were preparing to do human things. "Let me tell you about the last time I worked with the 47th, Vrask said, settling against the viewport. "This was 5 cycles ago, in the On campaign. We were supposed to secure a mining colony that the Krath had taken. Intelligence said 200 enemy combatants dug into the mining tunnels, using civilian hostages as shields." Pip's eyes widened. "That is a nightmare scenario, correct? Our plan was slow, careful. Minimize civilian casualties, gradually clear the tunnels. It would take 3 days, maybe 4. Acceptable losses projected at 20%, both military and civilian." Vrask's claws tapped against his armor. Diana Okafor listened to the entire briefing, nodded politely, then said, "I have a better idea." "Which was," she said, "give me 30 soldiers in 6 hours. I will get the civilians out and clear the tunnels." Vrask's mandibles spread. The Galactic commander laughed, actually laughed, told her it was impossible. She looked at him with those flat predator eyes and said, "Impossible is just expensive. Let me show you cheap." The stars glittered outside, indifferent to the violence about to unfold below. Diana took her 30 humans and did something we thought was suicidal. She split them into teams of 3, each team with a specific tunnel entrance. No heavy weapons, just rifles and what they carry. Then she contacted the Krath commander directly, using an open comm channel. "She what?" Pip could not hide his shock. She called him, introduced herself, told him exactly what was about to happen. Vrask's voice carried admiration despite himself. She said, "You have civilian hostages. I want them. In 2 hours my teams are coming in. You can surrender and live, or resist and die. Your choice, but either way I am getting those civilians." Pep was silent, processing this. The Krath commander called her bluff, said he would kill hostages if she attacked. Diana said, "And I remember this exactly. Then you better start with me because I will be the first one through your door." Vrask clicked thoughtfully. Then she cut the comm and told her teams to move. 2 hours? Pip asked. "You said 2 hours, but she told the Krath commander." "Misdirection," Vrask interrupted. "Humans lie very well, especially in war." While the Krath prepared for an assault in 2 hours, the human teams went in immediately. 30 soldiers, 10 tunnel entrances, complete surprise. He watched a dropship launch, its engines flaring bright against the darkness. What we saw next from our orbital monitors was chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos. The human teams moved through those tunnels like water flowing around resistance, drowning opposition. They used the darkness, used their own equipment to create false signals, made the Krath think there were hundreds of attackers instead of 30. Vrask's voice grew distant, remembering. Team 1 found the first group of hostages, 12 civilians, terrified and bound. The team leader, a woman named Lisa Park, called for extraction, but was told it would take 30 minutes to get transport to their position. You know what she did? Pap shook his head. She said, "Too slow," and she led those 12 civilians through active combat zones, using her own body as a shield, while her 2 teammates provided covering fire. She got all 12 out alive. She took 4 hits to her armor, 1 cracked her helmet, but she got them out. "That is incredibly brave." "That is a Tuesday for the 47th, Vrask corrected. Team 4 ran into a Krath strongpoint, 20 enemy soldiers in a fortified chamber. The team leader, guy named Rashid al-Hashimi, looked at the situation and decided that frontal assault was stupid, so he crawled through a ventilation duct, came up behind the Krath position and threw all his grenades at once into their ammunition stockpile. Pip winced. The explosion collapsed part of the tunnel. Rashid broke his left arm and got buried under rubble. His teammates dug him out, and he insisted on continuing the mission because, and these were his actual words, "I have another arm." He cleared 2 more sections one-handed before accepting medical evacuation. How long did the operation take? 4 hours and 17 minutes. All civilians recovered alive. All tunnels cleared. Krath casualties, 90%. Human casualties. Vrask's mandibles clicked slowly. 3 injured. None killed. Diana Okafor's report was 12 pages of tactical analysis. The last line said, "Told you it was cheap." Pip looked down at his claws, flexing them nervously. "Commander, I am not sure I can do what humans do." "You cannot," Vrask said bluntly. "But you do not need to. Let me tell you what you can do." He turned to face the recruit fully. "When we drop, you will be scared. That is good. Fear means your brain is working. Humans feel fear too. They just have this bizarre cultural thing where they pretend they do not, or they mock their own fear, or they channel it into aggression." Vrask's voice softened slightly. "You do not need to do that. You need to do your job. Follow orders. Watch your sectors. Trust your training." "But what if the humans do something crazy?" "They will," Vrask assured him. "Absolutely they will. When they do not try to stop them. You cannot. Instead, think about what happens next. If a human charges forward, think about what opening that creates. If a human calls for support, give it immediately because they would not ask unless they truly needed it. If a human tells you to fall back, you run. No hesitation. They do not abandon positions lightly. The observation deck's lighting shifted to amber, indicating 1 hour to drop operations. Come, Vrask said. Let us find your unit and get you equipped properly. I have some tips about working with humans that the standard briefing does not cover. They made their way to the drop bay, where organized chaos reigned supreme. Galactic forces were sorting into their assigned units, equipment was being distributed, and in one corner, unmistakably human in their movements and noise level, the 47th Expeditionary was preparing. Vrask could pick out humans by sound alone now. They were louder than most species, constantly communicating, and their language was full of words that translators struggled with. Slang, idioms, references to things that only other humans understood. Scorpion actual. This is Scorpion 3. I have 20 mags, 4 frags, 2 smokes, and 1 bad feeling about this drop. Scorpion 3. Bad feelings are not tactical data. Give me something useful. I am useful. I am delightful. I am a God's damn treasure. You are a headache with legs. Check your squad and report readiness. Pip stared at the humans with undisguised fascination. They were smaller than most galactic species, built compact and efficient, their armor covered in personal modifications and markings that would horrify any proper quartermaster. One human had painted flowers on their helmet, another had written something in human script across their chest plate. A third was eating something while checking their weapon, somehow doing both simultaneously. Is that Colonel Okafor? Pip whispered, pointing at a human who was reviewing a tactical display with 3 other soldiers. Vrask looked. Yes. And stay quiet. You do not interrupt a human commander during planning. They get irritated. But Diana must have heard them anyway, because humans had disconcertingly good hearing despite their inadequate ear structure. She looked up, saw Vrask, and her face split into what humans called a smile. It was meant to be friendly, but it still showed teeth, which Vrask's hindbrain insisted was a threat display. Commander Vrask. She crossed the bay in long strides, extending her hand for that bizarre human greeting where they grabbed each other's manipulators and moved them up and down. Good to see you. Heard you were on this ship. Vrask clasped her hand carefully, knowing humans liked firm grips but not wanting to damage her relatively fragile bones. Colonel, I see the 47th is ready to create problems. We prefer to solve them aggressively, she replied, her smile widening. Who is your friend? Recruit Pip, recently assigned to Ground Force Beta. First combat drop. Diana's expression shifted immediately, becoming something warmer, more genuine. She extended her hand to Pip, who hesitantly touched it, not quite understanding the gesture. First drop. Well, stick close to your commander here. Vrask is good people. Kept me from getting shot once. You were about to walk into a sniper zone, Vrask pointed out. Exactly. Kept me from getting shot. Diana's eyes sparkled with humor. You nervous, Pip? The recruit's scales flickered. Yes, ma'am. Good. Use it. Fear makes you careful, and careful keeps you breathing. She glanced at Vrask. You tell him any horror stories about us yet? Several. Make us sound appropriately terrifying. I did my best. Diana laughed. A sound that was surprisingly warm. We are not that scary. We just have different risk assessment protocols. Speaking of which, you might want to warn your recruits about our drop plan. Vrask's mandibles clicked with concern. What did you do? Nothing yet. But our insertion vector is a bit hot. We are dropping straight into a combat zone. No pre-landing bombardment because Command wants us on the ground fast. She pulled up a holographic display showing the terrain below. Landing zone Gamma, right on the edge of enemy-controlled territory. Intelligence says moderate resistance. Intelligence is frequently wrong, Vrask observed. Which is why we are planning for heavy resistance. Diana's finger traced a path on the display. We hit hard, secure the LZ, then push forward while Galactic forces establish a perimeter behind us. Classic hammer and anvil. Except we are the hammer, the anvil, and probably the handle too. Pip is staring at the display with mounting horror. That landing zone is within range of enemy artillery. Yep, Diana said cheerfully. Should be fun. We have counter-battery protocols, though. Soon as we touch down, our targeting teams will locate enemy guns and call in orbital strikes. Standard procedure. How long will that take? Pip asked. 30, maybe 40 seconds. That is too long. You will be sitting targets. Diana's smile became sharp. Only if we sit. We will be moving. Humans are good at moving. She clapped Pip on the shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie that nearly knocked him over. Relax, kid. You are with the best. We lose people sometimes. Not going to lie, but we try really hard not to, and we especially try hard when we have allies depending on us. An alarm sounded, low and insistent. 15 minutes to drop. That is my cue, Diana said. Vrask, always a pleasure. Pip remembered to breathe during the drop. Some species forget and pass out. Super embarrassing. She jogged back to her unit, already shouting orders that were half tactical instructions and half what sounded like jokes. Vrask guided Pip toward their own assembly area, where the rest of Ground Force Beta was gathering. Mora was there, her 6 limbs twitching nervously. Lorne stood like a mountain, impassive and ready. Jex was checking his equipment with obsessive precision. You talked to them? Mora asked immediately. The humans? Briefly, Vrask confirmed. We will be supporting their assault once they secure the landing zone. Supporting, Jex muttered. That implies they do not need us. They do not. Vrask, that honestly. Not in the way you think. They could probably take that objective alone, but humans understand combined arms warfare. They know they are better with allies than without, so we will support them, and in doing so, we learn from them. The final alarm sounded. 5 minutes. They loaded into the dropship, a Galactic design that prioritized safety over speed, which meant it was slow and heavily armored. Through the bulkhead, Vrask could hear the human ships launching, their engines screaming with barely controlled violence as they rocketed toward the planet below. The drop was exactly as terrible as every drop Vrask had ever experienced. Gravity pulled in wrong directions. The ship shook like it was trying to tear itself apart, and somewhere someone was making a noise that was either prayer or vomiting. Possibly both. Then they were through the worst of it, descending on repulsor fields, and the pilot's voice came over the comm, steady and bored. 30 seconds to landing zone. Reports indicate landing zone is hot. I repeat, hot. Human forces are engaged. Multiple hostile contacts. Pep's scales had gone pale copper. They are already fighting? They landed first, Vrask said, checking his rifle one last time. Of course they are already fighting. The ship touched down with a jolt, the rear ramp dropping to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. The landing zone was, technically, secure. This was true in the sense that human forces had established a perimeter and were actively shooting anything that tried to cross it. The sounds of combat were immediate and overwhelming. Energy weapons whining. Human projectile weapons, making their distinctive crack, crack, crack explosions in the middle distance, and over it all, human voices on the commnet. Contact left. Multiple hostiles. Engaging. Scorpion 2 has visual on enemy armor requesting fire support. Negative on fire support. Orbital assets are engaged elsewhere. Use what you have. Copy that. Pulling out the party favors. Vrask skled his recruits out of the ship and immediately took cover behind a makeshift barricade. Ahead, maybe 50 meters away, he could see human soldiers moving in coordinated chaos, fire teams leapfrogging forward while others provided covering fire. A massive explosion erupted in the distance. A fireball climbing into the sky. Scorpion 2, good kill on enemy armor. Advance and exploit. Pip was crouched next to Vrask, his scales flickering through several colors rapidly. This is madness. They are advancing into enemy fire. No, Vrask corrected, pointing. Watch closely. See how they move? 3 soldiers advance while 3 provide cover. Then they switch. Constant movement, but never everyone exposed at once. They are not charging blindly. They are using suppressing fire to create safe movement windows. A human soldier sprinted past their position, moving so fast it took a moment to register. The soldier dropped behind cover next to them, breathing hard but not panicked. Vrask recognized the markings. Scorpion 3. Hey, the human's voice was female, young and somehow amused despite the circumstances. You guys Beta Force. We have your advance route marked. Follow the blue smoke. Blue smoke? Mora asked, confused. The human pulled something from her belt, yanked a pin and tossed it forward. A canister bounced twice, then started spewing bright blue smoke. That blue smoke. Move up behind us. Stay in cover, watch for counterattacks from the right flank. We have left and center. Then she was gone, sprinting forward again to rejoin her unit. Come on, Vrask ordered, standing. We move now while they have the enemy's attention. They advanced through the smoke, following the path human forces had cleared. All around them was evidence of the fighting. Scorched earth where energy weapons had hit. Craters from explosions. A few enemy bodies and one human sitting against a rock, a medic working on his leg while he provided covering fire with his rifle. Keep moving, the injured human shouted at them. This position is secured. Get to the rally point. They kept moving. The rally point was a cluster of prefabricated structures that humans had somehow deployed in the 15 minutes since landing. Diana Okafor stood in the center, coordinating with multiple units simultaneously while reviewing tactical feeds. Scorpion 1 pushed to waypoint Charlie but watch for flanking. Scorpion 4 hold at Bravo and establish overwatch. Beta Force. When you arrive, I need you to secure the eastern approach. We have reports of enemy reinforcements coming from that direction. Vrask approached, his recruits fanning out behind him. Colonel, where do you need us? Diana looked up, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, a cut on her forehead that she had not bothered to address. Commander, perfect timing. Eastern approach. Like I said, we have sensor contacts indicating a counterattack forming. I need you to hold that approach for 30 minutes while we complete objective primary. What is objective primary? Classified but loud. Her smile was fierce. Can you hold? Vrask looked at his recruits, saw the fear in their eyes but also something else. They had made it this far. They had followed humans through hell and survived. We can hold. Good. If you need support, call. We will come. Humans do not leave allies hanging. Diana was already turning to the next crisis, the next decision. Now move. We do not have much time. They moved to the eastern approach, a narrow valley between two ridges that was, tactically speaking, a terrible place to defend. Limited cover, poor sightlines, multiple angles of attack. This is awful, Jex observed, stating the obvious. Yes, Vrask agreed. Which is why we will make it work. Lorne, you and your fire team take the left ridge. Mora, right ridge. Pip, you are with me. Center position. We wait a kill box. Anything that comes through this valley, we hit it from 3 sides. They set up quickly, using what cover existed, establishing firing positions, running cables for their communication net. Military training overriding fear. Contact. Lorne's voice, surprisingly calm. Multiple hostiles, approximately 200 meters and closing. Vrask brought up his rifle scope, seeing the enemy forces advancing. Prath troops, maybe 40 of them moving in standard formation. Behind them heavier units. Support weapons. This was going to be bad. Hold fire until they reach the mark, Vrask ordered, designating a point in the valley. Concentrated fire on my command. The Krath advanced, confident in their numbers. They reached the mark. Fire. The kill box worked exactly as designed. Crossfire from 3 positions caught the Krath advance in a devastating ambush. The first wave went down hard, their shields overwhelmed by concentrated fire, but there were more. Always more. They are flanking left. Mora's voice pitched high with stress. Lorne, shift fire to support left flank. Pip, watch our right. The battle devolved into chaos, the carefully planned ambush becoming a desperate fight as Krath forces tried multiple approaches simultaneously. Vrask found himself in the strange mental space of combat, where time moved wrong and every decision had to be instant and perfect. Then, cutting through the noise, a new voice on the comm in human. Beta Force. This is Scorpion 6. We have eyes on your position. You are about to be flanked from the southeast. Permission to engage? Granted, Vrask shouted back. too busy shooting to question how humans had seen a threat he had missed. 5 seconds later, the southeastern approach erupted in fire. Human weapons had a distinctive sound and the enemy flank collapsed under the assault. Southeast is clear, Beta Force. But you have more inbound from the north. We are moving to intercept. Hold your positions. They held. For 30 minutes they held that terrible valley, with human forces appearing seemingly at random to shore up weak points, eliminate flanking attempts, and generally ensure that the Galactic defenders did not get overwhelmed. Finally, Diana's voice. All units, objective primary complete. Begin staged withdrawal to secondary positions. Beta Force. Fall back on our perimeter. We have you covered. The withdrawal was almost as chaotic as the fighting, but they made it, falling back through human lines that closed behind them like a protective shield. Pip collapsed behind cover, his scales showing exhaustion and shock. We held. We did, Vrask confirmed, checking his troops. Minor injuries, nothing serious. They had survived. Diana found them an hour later, once the immediate crisis had passed. Beta Force performed well, no casualties? None, Vrask reported. Your intervention was timely. We watch out for our own. You are fighting beside us. That makes you our own. She surveyed the recruits, seeing their exhaustion. First combat drop is always rough. You all did good. Really good. Pip looked up at her, his scales slowly returning to normal color. Colonel, how do you do this? The fear, the chaos, the not knowing if you will survive the next second. Diana crouched down, meeting his eyes. You do it because others depend on you. You do it because someone has to. You do it because the alternative is worse. Her voice softened. And you do it together. No one fights alone. Remember that. She stood, addressing all of them. War is terrible. It breaks things, breaks people. But the one good thing about war, it shows you who you really are, and who stands beside you. Today, you stood beside humans. Tomorrow, we stand beside you. That is how this works. She walked away back to her command duties, leaving the recruits with new understanding. Vrask sat heavily, his own exhaustion catching up. Pip moved closer, still processing everything. Commander, the young Quellan said quietly, I understand now why you told us those stories. Why you needed us to know, and what do you understand? Humans are not invincible. They are just unwilling to quit. Pip's scales had shifted to a determined bronze. And if we fight beside them, some of that stubbornness rubs off. Vrask's mandibles clicked with approval. You learn fast. That will keep you alive. Around them, human and galactic forces worked together, securing positions, treating wounded, preparing for whatever came next. Two species, different in every way that mattered, united by the simple fact that they were on the same side and that had to be enough. It was enough. Somewhere in the distance, someone was laughing. Human laughter, bright and defiant, saying that today they had survived and that was worth celebrating. Pete listened to that laughter and understood, finally, what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. The war would continue. More battles, more fear, more chances to fail or succeed. But he would not face it alone. None of them would. That was the real story Vrask had been trying to tell. And in the end, it was the only story that mattered.